Welcome to the Toward a Healthy Built Environment Training for Health Professionals series. We're excited to be introducing Pam Moore, an Environmental Health Officer at Interior Health. Her presentation is entitled Engaging Local Governments in the Health Conversation.
Good morning, everybody. I can't tell you how happy I am to see all those faces and all of the little boxes of all the different sites after yesterday. Yesterday, this whole workshop was, the previous workshop was really focused on the theory. And the intent of this whole workshop is really looking at how we can take that theory and morph it over to action. And part of that action requires that we understand local government, and Gary's presentation really helps us to understand those parachute points. But sometimes it's difficult to figure out how you can take the health evidence and make it real to a policy change, or how you can help to influence where a community is at. So really our goal for the next couple of days is to look at, help you to understand partnerships, advocacy, and relationship buildings, and the different types of responses that you could give to a local government. But I think it's really more important to help everyone that's here today develop that confidence level to be able to go forward very confidently with the information that you have, having a whole bunch of, an arsenal of a whole bunch of resources. So yesterday, Tom Lancaster did an excellent job of talking about the different design principles that will inherently make a healthy built environment. You saw how the streetscape should look, the height of the buildings in relation to the street, the buildings close to the sidewalk, all of those things that I think your eye just picks up and you automatically know it's a healthy built environment, but he talked through those actual design principles. Gary talked about it from the planning perspective, the policy perspective of how you can get that into the policy to ensure that you will actually have those. So what I'd like to do is to talk about how we can engage local governments in the health conversation. So the goal is, we would hope, if the world was wonderful and we all had $1 million to play with, that we go into a community and we are familiar with the community that we're working with. We have a good working relationship with the planner, that you're very current with all the policies and programs in the community, you know where the community's going, you know where the community's come from, that you are really quite in tune with the community. You're comfortable with all of the portfolios in your health authority, you know the staff, you know where the evidence is, you know the health data, you are so prepared you can hardly stand it. However, the reality is, and if you're from health authorities, like ours is a good example, we have a lot of communities, we're geographically huge, we're all over the place. So the reality is you're not familiar with that community except if you Google Earth it. And you take the satellite view. The community, as Gary talked about, may not have a planner, or you haven't even made contact with the planner. The community might not have a planner, they've hired a consultant, and that consultant does not consider the health perspective. And part of the terms of reference that's created with the contract between the community and the consultant does not include a health perspective. So they don't really want to hear from you in the first place. So the other one is you don't have a relationship with the planner, and you have no idea who in your health authority is working with that community. You're basically going it alone. And the second scary part, especially for the environmental health officers that are in all the rooms here, is there's no legislative requirement for HBE. You are starting to get outside of your comfort zone of where you've normally been working. You are being asked to look at things from a different perspective, and you're also asked to be looking at it with a different skill set potentially. You are going out of the enforcement and education aspect of legislation, and you're going over to, I refer to it as the schmooze factor. You're going and you are not telling somebody or informing someone of what they should be doing. You're asking, how can I help support you to move towards this healthier direction? That is very, very different than the way that we have operated in the past. However, we do have, at this point in time, so many resources available. You've seen it, anybody that's been here, the last workshop and yesterday's workshop, you recognize that you're not going it alone because there are so many other professionals that are all going in the same direction. So it's a good thing. So I thought when I was doing this that what might be of help is a cheat sheet. So just as David Letterman has his top 10 things, so too does HBE. And these are what I would consider the top 10 things to consider. I think they all have an ability to create some confidence as you go through each of the steps. As Gary said, a lot of these planning processes take time. You too have time. You have time to organize your thoughts and your response, more importantly. It doesn't have to be done haphazardly. It can actually be done in a very thoughtful process where that you can bring together all the multiple portfolios and the multiple stakeholders internally within your own organization to create what that response will be. You don't have to do it alone. Because it does take, especially with the OCPs and the strategic plans, take a number of readings before it's adopted by council, you do have that opportunity. As Gary has said, you know, we hope that we're involved at the very, very beginning. But the reality is, quite often you're not. So breathe, we're going to have time. That's the one thing coming out of that. There is time. And respect the fact that it's going to take time to develop a working relationship with your planner and other local government staff. I was very lucky with Gary, and I think I went in about 2008. I'll try to be politically correct. And I believe I said, I'm dumber than a doorknob, please help me as it relates to planning. And he was very, very kind and helped me. But it took, I'm going to say probably 4 years, right, with the OCP and figuring out what did we want to say? What does health want to say? What's our goal? What's the end goal? What's the positive? What do we have? What can we bring? All of those questions evolve as you move forward, and all of those processes are very dependent on the community that you're involved with. If it's a very small community, you may not have a lot of evidence or data, but you've got yourself and you've got all of your member portfolios inside your organization. Recognize none of this exists in a vacuum. Planners move on. Councils may change. Council's direction may change. In the case of Interior Health, we've been reorged so many times, I forget how many times. So, you know, reorganization happens. The people you thought that you had, they move on. So all of this does take a fair amount of time. I think number 8, pardon me, is something that we need to be very cognizant of. Respect the process. And by that I mean, yes, it takes a lot of time, but it's also a lot of money and effort to create any of the strategic plans, OCP, regional growth strategies, the thematic plans like the master plans that Gary was talking about. So you have to respect that they're doing an awful lot of work. Planners will hear it from both sides. You've got the pressure of what council wants, you've got what the public wants. You're not the only one in the room when it comes to these plans. Health is not the only one in the room. The Local Government Act also creates some barriers to implementing health in all policies. Just as Gary talked about with the affordable housing, local governments can't do that. So know the fact that respect where their own legislation takes them. There's a lot of information that come from a number of different focus areas, and planners need to digest all of that information, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. Number 7, I can't underscore this one enough. Respect the community. Do your homework. Be very knowledgeable and current with their issues. It is, I think, extraordinarily disrespectful to walk into a community and not know where that community's at. Cruise their website, read their plans, find out what other plans are there, find out what's happening. You walk in and I'm health, will not go down well with most people. But if you walk in and you actually know that they're in the process of, they just got an age-friendly grant and they're in process of doing a transportation plan and you think they might be updating their OCP, you've done your homework. And more importantly, the planners and anyone else of city staff there, municipal staff you're working with, will respect the fact that you've done your homework. Basically what that is saying is get out from behind your desk. I think if you respect the community, means you also respect the staff that you're working with. Find out who the planner is. Go meet the planner. Chat on the phone if nothing else. In our situations, quite often, I can't go meet the planner. We're too far away from the planner. So we'll phone. Great way to establish a relationship. So too with the engineering department. So too with the parks planning. Get out from behind your desk. Even if it's virtual, just get out from behind your desk. Number 6. There are a number of different voices at the table, be it whatever part of the planning process you're at, the consultation process, be it public consultation, stakeholder groups, whatever it is. There's special interest groups. Gary was talking about different ministries. And all those ministries are coming to the table with their own top 10 as well, right? They really want to be heard. If you're a resource-based community, you know that resource is going to be pretty much the trump card for that municipality. So respect that you are not the only one. You need to understand that all of those special interest groups have as much passion about their interest and want to promote it as you do. Our perspective is just one of many. Gary and I have, I think, a story that we've told before. There was, I think in the OCP, I know in the OCP, there was this little old lady from an organization. She was 4'2". She was a whippersnapper, and she just wanted to be heard really all the time. She never stopped. But fair enough, her voice, she was very passionate about it. So you kind of had to work around her and muzzle her. So.
She wouldn't be muzzled.
She would not be muzzled, that was correct. So number 5 down to number 1 is really talking about you. What do you want to say? The start to engaging with the local government is really finding out what you can say and what do you want to say, what can and want to say. What do you have? Evidence, data, local knowledge. Again, based on the community, it's going to look different for all of the different communities. Who has the expertise? In our health authority, we don't talk about food security. We have public health dietitians that will talk about it much better than we will. And there's that direct connection. We offer the resource of their content expertise, but we also offer the resource of them, the actual staff. Just as Gary said, health language is difficult for others to understand. I stopped myself in one presentation when I was yammering on about chronic diseases, and I thought, do people even know what chronic diseases are? Like, should I not even explain it? And I started to actually explain it. We have a lot of acronyms in health. But I actually think, planning, you've got more acronyms. I'm sorry, you take it.
Guilty.
Oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. So planning language is going to be very hard for us to understand as well. There is that sweet spot. And I think there is our common ground where we figure out what it is we're exactly trying to say. I thought that Brent Harris's presentation yesterday was very good when he talked about evidence. It has to be convincing, defensible, reproducible, unbiased, and palatable from a political perspective. I think we have to be very cognizant of we got a pile of evidence. Not always applicable for smaller communities, probably not applicable for rural. We've got a lot of data. Again, some of it's going to be applicable for smaller communities and some isn't going to be applicable. But we have people. We have ourselves and we have other portfolios within our health authority that can help demystify or make it more realistic, the evidence and the data for our health authority. We're very lucky here. We have our epidemiologists that can help us frame the evidence that we have into the best picture for the community that we're working with. So we do have a lot of extra help. So just as what you want to say is important, how do you want to say it? Tabletop exercises, a written response by far is the easiest. You take a review of a plan, you look at what evidence you can provide. The linkages toolkit helps us to figure out pretty quickly the planning principles that we're reviewing in an OCP or regional growth strategy or whatever type of plan it is, and we can apply, cut and paste those planning principles into our response. It's just lovely. It's a lovely way of doing things. Easiest. The next one, of course, is stakeholder tables. Stakeholder tables starts to, one, require you get up from behind your desk. Two, now you've got to start framing what it is you want to say and how are you going to say it? Because I have not been at a stakeholder table where someone says, okay, Health, could you give us your perspective? Most often, you are at a table of 8 or 9 people, and you're all coming from different ministries, different perspectives, and they're all talking to the facilitator about their perspective. So the question is, how do you get your perspective on the table? How do you make your perspective compelling? And how do you make it part of the discussion going forward with your table? I have a trick, and I will come to the end of that, and I'll tell you how. You can do presentations to planners. That is very scary. But presentations to council and or public, I would suggest, are scarier. And they're hard to do because they're going to throw you questions, and you're going to be like a deer in the headlight. And you're going to go, oh God, get me out of here, please. Let the lights go off, let the power go, whatever, get me out of here. However, there's absolutely marvelous ways of how you can prepare for those things. And that the beauty is, and the recognition, and please keep this always at the front of your head, you have health evidence. You're an unbiased voice, and you're the only one speaking about health. You go off the health evidence, you go off topic, you're on your own. You stick on course, you stick on your game plan, you're going to have no problems with it. You really don't need to reinvent the wheel a lot of times. And that's actually where the linkages toolkit has come in very well. There's some summary pages, and I can't tell you where the pages are, but we've taken those to some of our workshops and used them because it summarizes the five domains, and it's short snappers. It's a one-pager that you can take out. And I hold those dear to my heart because if you are presenting, you can always go back to them and go, see what it says? See what it says? So you're staying on topic. So just as what you say, how you say is important, when do you want to say it? Sometimes the evidence and the data is not what is wanted from you. In the case of some stakeholder tables that I've been at, in the case of, we went yesterday through a comprehensive development zone plan, it would be difficult for us to apply evidence and data to that plan. It wasn't what was really wanted. Stakeholders table, they just want you there to sometimes just bring up the fact that, hey, how we actually go through our daily life and the barriers that are thrown up in our face, or the opportunities that are thrown up in our face to actively engage with our community is as important as saying if you have X number of intersections per square kilometer, you're going to reduce your obesity level by X amount. There's different ways of saying the exact same thing, and sometimes that's what is wanted. That I call it easy speak. How do you bring it down to an individual level that everybody understands? Even the little old lady, the 4'2" little old lady at the OCP, public consultations. There's a way to do it. And I think that going forward, number three here, all the way down to number 1, I just keep repeating really the same thing is you have to learn to reframe the very dry evidence and the data into something that is palatable for all and makes it compelling for others to hear. And people, by and large, when they think about how they go through their daily life, the difficulty of getting to their grocery store, the distance to their school, the sidewalks that either aren't there or are broken or only on one side, or whatever it may be, you hit them at their individual level and you're convincing and you're compelling. The evidence follows that in that case. Sometimes your voice is needed for giving that evidence, but other times it's just to help support a planner who is giving, by and large, somewhat dry policy statements. Is that a fair comment? Okay.
It is. It's a little dry.
And you're making it real for people. So when you say things becomes very important, because sometimes you're just going to say it as evidence. You're doing a written response. You're just giving evidence. You're just giving a planning principle and you're supporting it with health evidence. Sometimes you're making it real for the people that are, for example, at a stakeholders table or a public consultation. Recognize we have an unbiased voice and a very unique perspective. Nobody else brings this to the table. I can tell you that. They do not bring this to the table whatsoever. But you can. And you can do it because we now have so many resources that are available that you can do it. You should know, and I know not all of the health authorities are in sort of the site-specific development or referrals that Interior does here. But know the difference between site-specific comments where it's drilled down, I would say, and I think Gary and I talked about it, we don't have as much impact at that stage as we do at an OCP stage. But know that your comments will be different based on those two different scenarios. So, number 2, why should they listen to you? This by far is the hardest skill to develop. And I can tell you from my experience that when you're talking to someone and you start seeing their eyes drift, you know that you haven't done it well. I had a lot of eyes drifting. And I'd come back, listen to me, listen to me. It's been my experience that your first meeting with the public, planners, council is going to be your most important. You need to be concise, compelling, focused, and knowledgeable of what you want to say. If you expect to go in there and free fall it, good for you if you can do it. I personally have never been able to do it. I come in quite prepared. I come in knowing that community, where they're going, where they've been, where they think they want to be. I've usually spoken to the planner and kind of asked, what's the scoop? I've made sure that I am confident enough in the community. Those that know me know that I am so geographically stunned when it comes to direction that I quite often I get lost in every community. I do not get streets. I don't get it. I don't get it east, west, north, south. So I have to rely on what I can gather from the websites that I go to and talking to others. But if I am doing a cold call with the planner, I will contact them. And I want to make darn sure that my spiel is one that they want to grab onto. And I do that by being prepared. I do that by using some factoids. One that works here is for every 30 minutes that you're driving in a car, your obesity rate goes up by, I can't remember, it's 6 or 3%. It's a big deal out here because everybody drives, right? So some of those factoids, have them in your back pocket. Things you can bring out. Bring the evidence of the community. We have some of our communities that we know that the health trend, 60% self-report is obese or overweight. You can bring that stuff, the health evidence, to that conversation. And I think it becomes very important because your first shot is your best shot. If you lose it on your first shot, you're running to catch up. You don't have to. You actually don't have to because you're going to be prepared. So what has worked well for me is simple speak. I try very, very hard not to use academic speak and health language. And if I do use those acronyms, I always make sure I spell them out. So that I don't go HBE. I go healthy built environment, healthy built environment. I just make it easy. And more importantly, I try very hard to make it real to people because we all look at things from our individual perspectives. And we're going to have little nuances of what we look at, but almost every OCP that I have ever read, regional growth strategy, is you want to make a healthy community. It's a goal everybody wants. So it's not hard to get people to that point. What's hard is how you can get health included in the conversation, because people don't necessarily know how a healthy community is formed. I would say that health and planning are very similar in having a difficulty sometimes to explain how a zoning bylaw can impact you, the individual. So too is it difficult to say how a healthy built environment can impact chronic disease reduction. So we need to make it easy. Number one, sorry if I'm over, Tanis, shoot me later. Why? She smiled. Why is it important to you? Number one and number two go together, because when it's important to you, it's easier to sell to others. I cannot underscore this enough. I think in the first workshop, I introduced the first workshop and I used the example of kids. So just for those that don't know, I was a PHI, Public Health Inspector in Alberta for a number of years, moved here, became a child care licensing officer, and then came back to the fold. I look at the perspective from a child, and most of my presentations, most of my focus, most of my factoids I keep in my back pocket is from how does it impact a child? It's easy for me. It's motherhood. Nobody wants to do anything bad to a child. It's actually it's a bit of a selling feature. But when it becomes important to you, it's going to be much, much easier for you to become passionate about it. So I could go on for the next 5 hours about kids, and I can bring you 1,000,001 facts and 1,000,001 best practice and all of that stuff. But that's my focus. If your focus is seniors because your parents have a chronic disease and there's some issues, if it's mental health because you know somebody that has some mental health issues, if it's disabled, if it's age groups, if it's anybody, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But you're going to it's going to become real to you, and you're going to start to link how that population group, how all of neighborhood design impacts them, how housing will impact them, how the natural environment is going to impact them. It's going to make it that much easier to figure out how you can sell it to others. And I think that this is my little phrase for the day. You don't have to have all of the answers. You just need to know where you can find them and be confident in what you know.